There is a distinct historical pattern in professional golf where the governing bodies push the elite players to the absolute brink, and we are watching history repeat itself with terrifying precision. If you rewind the tape to the 2018 US Open at Shinnecock Hills, you will remember a tournament where the USGA entirely lost control of the golf course, resulting in a third-round scoring average of 75.3 and Brooks Koepka winning with a score over par. Players walked off the 18th green that week explicitly describing the course architecture and setup as fundamentally broken and inherently unfair. That was a localized disaster confined to 4 days of bad agronomy and arrogant pin placements. What we are witnessing in 2026 is exponentially more dangerous because the frustration is no longer confined to the grass. It has infected the boardroom. The anger that defined Shinnecock in 2018 is now the baseline emotional state of the entire PGA Tour roster heading into the exact same venue. We are weeks away from the US Open, and the ecosystem is imploding. 9 of the most respected, carefully spoken names in professional golf have publicly broken rank to condemn a sweeping series of rule changes that threaten the foundational meritocracy of the sport. This is the direct fallout of new CEO Brian Rollap's 2025 takeover, a regime change that promised modernization but delivered a structural gutting of the tour's middle class. The mandate to shrink fully exempt field sizes from 125 down to an exclusionary 100 players, coupled with a ruthlessly condensed schedule, is not a simple administrative tweak. It is a calculated eradication of playing cards, directly threatening the livelihoods of the grinding professionals who make up the backbone of the tour. Add the impending 2028 golf ball rollback rule mandate forcing professionals to use equipment that travels up to 15 yards shorter, and the frustration has finally boiled over into a full-scale public revolt. Players who normally bite their tongues to protect their sponsor exemptions and corporate relationships are firing live ammunition at the executives. This is a multiplayer, multi-issue response from guys who understand that their careers are being used as collateral damage in a corporate chess match. The narrative being spun by the suits is that smaller fields fix the pace of play and the rollback protects historic venues, but the locker room is seeing right through the smokescreen. This is a battle for the soul and the financial viability of professional golf. What's up, true students of the game? If you want real golf analysis, deep dive tactical breakdowns, and absolutely no clickbait, hit that subscribe button. To understand the severity of this crisis, you have to completely ignore the press releases and follow the underlying mathematics of the tour's new operating model. For decades, the PGA Tour operated on a brutal but transparent meritocracy. Perform inside the ropes, make the cut line, and nobody can take your career away from you. By slashing the fully exempt fields from 125 down to 100, the organization has unilaterally breached that unwritten contract. They are artificially restricting the supply of playing opportunities to manufacture a more premium television product, but the human cost is catastrophic for the bottom half of the roster. Lucas Glover, a 6-time winner and US Open champion who rarely courts controversy, completely detonated the tour's official narrative. When the executives claimed that the field size cuts were a necessary step to improve the pace of play, Glover went on the offensive, stating that hiding behind pace of play challenges the player's intelligence. He didn't just disagree with the policy, he accused the organization of operating on the assumption that the membership is fundamentally stupid. The financial reality that Glover exposed is the unspoken truth of the 2026 PGA Tour. There are 200 guys out there whose entire economic existence depends on those starts. By eliminating those spots, the tour is systematically wiping out the working class professional. Glover accused the executives of using the pace of play argument as a convenient cover story for their actual motive, which is funneling the massive purse size increases exclusively toward a handful of superstar players. The boardroom strategy is nakedly transparent to anyone paying attention to the balance sheets. The tour is terrified of further defections to LIV Golf, and they are leveraging the careers of the rank-and-file members to subsidize the loyalty of the elite top 20. When a measured, analytical major champion like Matt Fitzpatrick immediately takes to social media to validate Glover's accusations, calling the pace of play excuse pathetic, you know the internal communications have completely broken down. Fitzpatrick's public alignment with Glover proves that this isn't just the bottom of the money list complaining about losing their jobs. The guys who are financially secure, the ones who don't need to worry about sponsor exemptions, are looking at the financial engineering of the tour and recognizing it as fundamentally unsustainable. The tour is playing a dangerous game of leverage, betting that the players lack the unity to actually strike or litigate, but the temperature in the locker room suggests the executives have severely miscalculated. The friction regarding field sizes was merely the appetizer for the ultimate betrayal. The equipment rollback. The dynamics inside the locker room have shifted from passive grumbling to active, organized hostility toward the USGA and the R&A. The mandate that, starting in 2028, professionals must use a ball that travels up to 15 yards shorter is viewed by the membership as an atrocity against modern athletic development. The players on the Player Advisory Council, PAC, and those grinding on the range have spent thousands of hours and millions of dollars optimizing their biomechanics, only to have the governing bodies artificially cap their output. When you have Bryson DeChambeau explicitly calling the rollback the most atrocious thing you could possibly do to the sport, you are hearing the voice of a player whose entire tactical identity has been outlawed by executives who don't hit the shots. DeChambeau revolutionized the game through speed training and ballistics, and the governing bodies responded by changing the laws of physics. Across the entire locker room, the consensus is undeniable. The players do not want this, they do not trust the data being used to justify it, and they firmly believe it will fail to fix the perceived distance problem. Justin Thomas, another two-time major champion, echoed this exact sentiment, labeling the rollback as simply bad for the game of golf. When the best ball strikers on the planet are universally aligned against an equipment change, it creates a toxic political environment. You have players looking at the USGA representatives on the practice tee not as partners in growing the game, but as adversaries actively attempting to make their professions vastly more difficult. The trust deficit is massive, and it permeates every single conversation behind the scenes. Ricky Fowler perfectly captured the existential dread of the wider membership when he questioned whether the current trajectory actually reflects what the PGA Tour is supposed to represent. Fowler, a former top 5 player who has navigated the brutal reality of losing and regaining his elite form, understands the consequences of these changes firsthand. He recognizes that fewer cards and fewer events alter the very DNA of the tour, turning a competitive ecosystem into an exclusive closed-shop exhibition. Yet, amidst this universal backlash, Rory McIlroy remains the glaring anomaly. The reigning Masters champion has chosen to publicly defend the ball rollback, arguing that it puts the game on a path of sustainability and won't affect the average amateur. McIlroy's willingness to defend the establishment politically isolates him from the overwhelming majority of his peers. He is taking the corporate line while the rest of the locker room prepares for war, creating a fascinating and tense dynamic among the game's ultimate elite. To truly grasp why the players are revolting, you must analyze the physics of the rollback and how it directly impacts course setup strategy. Taking 15 yards off the golf ball does not just change the club a player selects for their approach. It fundamentally alters the smash factor, the apex of the trajectory, and the stopping power of the golf ball on firm greens. The governing bodies argue that modern players overpower legendary courses, but rolling back the ball forces players to hit longer irons into greens that were historically designed to receive short irons, mathematically destroying their strokes gained. Approach metrics. Because the USGA and PGA of America cannot yet implement the 2028 rollback, their superintendents are violently overcompensating in the present day by weaponizing the golf courses. We saw this exact phenomenon explode at the 2026 PGA Championship just last week. Instead of letting the architecture dictate the challenge, the organizers manipulated the rough length and the pin placements to artificially inflate the scores, resulting in a setup that failed to identify the best players. Even Rory McIlroy, the lone defender of the tour's long-term vision, could not tolerate the agronomic disaster of the PGA Championship. He publicly criticized the setup, noting correctly from a tactical perspective that the best setup spread the field. A heavily bunched leaderboard is the ultimate statistical indicator of a setup that has failed its primary job. It means the course is so defensively configured that it neutralizes elite ball striking, bringing the mediocre players right back into the mix. World number 1 Scottie Scheffler went significantly further with his technical analysis, calling specific pin positions downright absurd. When the best iron player on planet Earth, a man whose entire dominance is built on precision and distance control, states that it was the most difficult setup he has seen in 7 years on tour. It is a devastating indictment. Justin Thomas backed him up, stating he had never seen a leaderboard so tightly packed in his entire life, proving that the setup was dictating the outcome rather than the player's skill. This is the hidden crisis that the television broadcast glosses over. The governing bodies are trying to protect par by making the landing areas impossibly narrow and the greens unholdable. They are punishing good golf shots to protect their own egos and the perceived difficulty of their tournaments. When you combine the physical changes of the impending rollback with the current retaliatory course setups, you get a product that is frustrating to play and increasingly chaotic to predict. All of this tactical frustration, financial anxiety, and locker room politics is currently accelerating toward a catastrophic collision on June 18th. The 2026 U.S. Open is returning to Shinnecock Hills, arguably the most punishing, unforgiving acreage in American golf. If you understand the agronomic history of that venue, you already know why sending a roster of deeply furious, disillusioned professionals onto that property is a remarkably dangerous combination. Here is the pragmatic reality that the media is entirely ignoring. The organization hosting the U.S. Open is the exact same organization that the players are currently at war with. The USGA is the governing body pushing the ball rollback that Justin Thomas called bad for the game, and now they hold the keys to the hardest tournament of the year. They are hosting a field of angry players on a course they famously broke the last time they visited in 2018. The psychological state of the field cannot be overstated. You have 9 of the biggest stars in the sport leading an active revolt against shrinking cards and rolled back equipment, stepping onto a venue where the cut line will likely be an absolute bloodbath. The players already feel like the people running professional golf are not truly listening to them, and a standard, brutal USGA setup at Shinnecock will only validate their belief that the governing bodies are fundamentally out of touch with the modern game. Despite the multiplayer, multi-issue backlash, the Tour and the USGA have not walked back a single initiative. They are forcing modernization through executive mandate, stripping away the meritocracy of the field sizes, and altering the physics of the sport without genuine player buy-in. When you execute all of these massive variables simultaneously without the consent of the athletes providing the entertainment, you don't get a modernized product. You get a fractured, hostile tour. So, let's look at the chessboard as we head into major season. Are the executives at the PGA Tour and the USGA legitimately protecting the long-term sustainability and legacy of historic golf courses, or are there aggressive rule changes and manufactured course setups destroying the very fabric of the professional game? Drop your tactical analysis in the comments below, because the echoes from Shinnecock are going to shape the next decade of this sport.